Hi, this is Josh from Manhattan Edit Workshop. Welcome to Sight, Sound, and Story Live, Making It Work from, I forgot the second half of the name of the event. So there you go. I was talking about how things never go wrong on these events and then something goes wrong within the first 5 seconds. So welcome to Sight, Sound, and Story Live. This is just how we roll. I wanted to say thanks up front to the staff at Manhattan Edit Workshop, Jason Banky and Janet Dalton, who are doing all sorts of things under the hood here to make sure that this stream is up and running and that everybody can hear and see everybody else, and that we can deliver a great event to you guys. I say this every event, I'll say it again. So much of what we do is about the technical aspect of editing and the keyboards and shortcuts and the mechanics of it. And it's really great to break out from that and talk about the creative side, the why of the decision making. There's a lot of that to discuss in tonight's event. I wish I could be part of the discussion. I will be waiting in the wings, and I'll be very excited to hear what our moderator and panelists have to say. So I'm going to just introduce them now. I'm going to thank our sponsors, OWC, American Cinema Editors, and AJA first. And I will also say that things generally, aside from me forgetting what I'm trying to say, things generally go very well. This is a technical online exercise, so if there are any hiccups, you will obviously see or hear them. We will fix them as fast as we can. We can text out to the group that's on the Vimeo chat that you should probably be seeing on the side of the player. And also, we'd love to hear your questions and get your comments. That's what the chat window is for. So tell us who you are, where you're from, ask questions. We'll get to them at a section toward the end of the program tonight. And if you'd like to be identified, just let us know your name with the question, and we can ID who you are, where you're calling from, and include that in the discussion. So without further ado, I want to introduce Jeremy Workman, Nels Bangerter, and Kirsten Johnson, who are going to engage there. By the way, they win the award for best and most varied Zoom backgrounds of any of our events so far. So take it away, guys. Have a great event. And if you need me, I'm right there in the chat box. All right.
Thanks, Josh. See you
Thank
later.
you.
Talk to you soon.
Awesome, thanks, Josh. I'll kick us off just as the role of moderator here. So thank you, Josh, and Manhattan Edit Workshop. As he said, we're excited to do this over Zoom. I have previously moderated an event for this organization in a theater, and frankly, I think this is, in some ways, there's a real benefit to doing it here now. I know there's probably people from across the country, so it really opens it up and makes it so that you could all sort of discover all this interesting stuff of this amazing movie. So I'll just kind of kick us off a little bit, but then you won't have to hear me talking much. I also do have my green screen going, and the light is getting dim here in Brooklyn, so pretty soon I'll start being, Invisible Man, and you'll see through me soon. So, for now, it's pretty good. Anyway, I'm really thrilled. I was thrilled when I was approached to be involved in this conversation here. I love this movie. It's such an amazing movie, and it's so well cut. It is so incredibly well edited.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah, I mean, it really, really is, and I know that there's a lot of editors watching, and aspiring editors and people that work in post. This is a really, really incredibly edited movie. And there's a number of reasons why. I'm sure you guys all know the movie and have been and have seen it and enjoyed it. I think a number of reasons why is that it's kind of bouncing all these different aspects going on at once. On one hand, it's this incredible personal movie. It's a first-person documentary, obviously featuring Kirsten, who I am going to, like all her friends, call her KJ for the rest of this meeting. It features her as this first-person movie, but it's also doing this very bold, formal, almost quasi-experimental thing where it's really looking at the form, the idea of documentary. It's moving, it's poetic, it's emotional, but it's also really fun and entertaining and like gleeful. And I just think it's so complex. You know, a lot of documentaries, they're just sort of going, you know, on some sort of timeline. Sometimes it's chronological. Sometimes it's an event or something that really is the skeleton of a movie. This is not. It's going in all these different ways where what's so amazing about it is coming through in how it's edited, how it's been structured, how it's been synthesized and put together. So it's just a really extraordinary documentary in terms of how it's been edited. And I know, you know, we're going to dig in close. We'll listen to everybody's questions. Nels, this is just really a remarkable piece of work as an editor. So
Thanks
why
so
don't
much.
I kick us off? You know, I know we could do introductions at some point and go over people's bios, but you know, everybody could catch up. Yeah, everybody could catch up. So why don't we just start? Just because I know this is so much about the director and editor. KJ, why don't you talk a little about how you and Nels have worked? Just for everybody, you know, watching and listening, this is their second film together, which we're going to definitely discuss. KJ's previous film is another amazing movie called Cameraperson, which in full disclosure, I did the trailer on.
Best trailer ever.
Great
Best trailer
yeah.
ever. Yes, thank you. So shout out to my team at Wheelhouse and other editors, Cheryl and Rob and everybody involved in that. But why don't you guys talk a little about your own collaboration, working together, and how you guys sort of have developed your working relationship?
Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for that introduction. And, you know, you who cut so much and with such capacity, it means a lot coming from you to acknowledge, I think, you know, the extraordinary work that Nels did on Cameraperson and has done on this film. And I think the thing that's powerful between us is that we have found our way to a process that I think it is the sort of the thing that Nels says about Cameraperson, and now I repeat about this movie, is we want to make a movie that teaches us how to make it. We want to make a movie that gives the audience the capacity to learn how to watch it while they're watching it. And I think our process working together has been this process that's taught us how to make the kind of films that we are now making together. So just to say, like, I think in some ways, part of why our process like took off in the beginning was because I had worked for years as a cinematographer, and with a lot of different kind of people, with extraordinary people, and also with people who, you know, were first-time filmmakers or filmmakers so caught up in what they were doing that it didn't occur to them that I needed to eat, or a break might be good, or that I was not as obsessed with the things that they were obsessed with. And so something about having spent a lot of my career in the role of crew like meant that one of the first things I said to Nels when we were talking about working together was like, how would you, like, what's the way you would love to work? Because I know for me as a cinematographer, if someone asked me like, what do you need? What do you love? How do you want to work together? If someone asked me that first, I would probably give my best work to that person, which is, you know, that's where I was coming to Nels at, like, just like, what are your things? And he led the way in the beginning of like what our approach was. So, you know, Nels, like, I'm going back to like the beginning of Cameraperson, but I have a very clear memory of that conversation and the things you said. I don't know if you remember it at all.
I don't remember it exactly, but I do remember there being a really nice personal connection as well. I mean, there you know, little like religious elements in our background that we sort of shared, or just sense of humor, or the kind of books we like to read, and that was just you know, a little spark to the beginning of what's a friendship and a working relationship. But KJ is also a phenomenally good collaborator with every crew person, every person who works on her movies or works on movies she's working on. And I think I'd heard great things about you from the film that I'd cut before Cameraperson, which was called Very Semi-Serious, which KJ shot. And as an editor, you're watching all this footage, raw footage. And if there's a way to be a cinematographer without being one, it's to see through the eyes of the shooter, the world that they're shooting. And so I'd spent that time with KJ in some ways without ever even having met, and kind of knew how she worked and knew how her footage started to work, and that's a funny connection. I think that the shooter's connected to the subject in the same way that I'm connected to the shooter, in a way, like kind of a step away.
So how, but she's throwing this footage that's highly personal to you, and that's first person footage. How are you sort of, channeling, her vision as a director, and KJ's got a real vision here. How are you sort of, processing that vision when so much of this is about her sort of personal experience, personal visions?
Well, KJ's an intuitive person and an intuitive shooter, and I think different kinds of footage speaks to you in different ways. But when you watch the material that she's shot, to me, it's sort of like KJ was saying, it begins to dictate the way that you work with it. And I think if you just watch for its subtleties, watch for what she's finding really interesting, and I mean, of course, she can turn the camera off or on, but it's there, and it's in kind of trusting that and not fighting it too much. I think that the more experience I get with an editor, the less I want to fight. Maybe with directors I want to fight, no, but I don't want to fight the footage. I certainly, you learn more and more that a scene is going to work if it works, and it's going to be really hard to make it work if it doesn't work. And getting into that battle with your own movie is often counterproductive. You have to find a way to embrace its strengths and leave out its weaknesses rather than fix its weaknesses. So yeah, I'm not quite sure where I started on that, but I think it's just a matter of kind of being open to what comes in. And I think on Dick Johnson, KJ was sending me whole new kinds of footage that neither of us had worked with before. These stunts, these kind of quasi recreations and attempts at things that we were going to do visual effects on, and there was all sorts of new things coming in, but they still had a voice of her work. So I think that's seeing that helps it stay personal.
Go ahead.
Jeremy, can I just take it back to the original conversation that Nels and I had about how he likes to work?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. What did he say?
Well, what he said is,
what did I say?
he said, I like to talk a lot in the beginning, like talk as much as you need to talk, like get together, be together in person and just talk about everything. And then I'm interested in, after that conversation, then just send me footage and then leave me alone for a while. And I really like that idea because I had a lot to say about what my questions were making Cameraperson, and all the stuff that I was wrestling with, and I had a lot to say. And I didn't know what he was going to get from the footage or not get from the footage, but I was really invested in, like, I've got all these big ideas. And I was just talking to Joe Beanie the other day, and he was always like, Joe Beanie is the extraordinary editor of, 27 Werner Herzog movies and Andrea Arnold movies and Lynn Ramsey movies. And Joe was like, directors always have big ideas about what they're up to. And yes, we do. And we're very attached to them. And in some ways, like, I think Nels's strategy is get it all out of your system. Like, just lay it on me, all the things you think this movie is about. So, when I talk about Dick Johnson is Dead, I'm like, it's about time. It's about consciousness. It's about what is a self. It's about life and death, and I could talk about that for 5 days. And Nels, like, we just have those conversations. And really deep, personal, go to family history. And what was beautiful with this is we had built, like, we've now built out of Cameraperson, like, Nels deeply knows things that I think about my mother. You know, all those kinds of things, like, are already in our relationship. But that really has worked for me, that sort of like, just really get all of it out, go through it, flesh it around. And I think Nels is very open to sort of the ways that the unconscious is at work for a director, and also sort of in the life of cutting, that they're just sort of magical, weird things that happen. And when they happen, like, let them be there, even if you don't know how are they going to pan out or how do they fit into things. But when the magic is starting to like bubble up, just like let it sit with it.
But Nels, how do you, and this is something I'm very curious about, how do you kind of keep a sense of the, the forest from the trees when directors are talking to you in these sort of grand ideas, and then now it's your job to cut a scene where, Dick Johnson is eating soup at a dinner table. Like, how do you then translate that?
Exactly.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it is that listening and kind of absorbing ideas, and watching a movie or reading a book or an article, or thinking about something. I think sort of just creates a mindset and a world of ideas that the movie exists in, and then I just sit down and do my job in a way and cut the scene the way, and then but let those ideas be in the back of my mind. And I don't want to make it sound too mystical, because I'm not a mystical person, but it's kind of a subconscious way that those things come through, and I'll find myself making a decision and then thinking about that decision in light of one of those conversations, or even at a grander level, kind of considering myself to be um, embodying KJ's intention when she's shooting this stuff, and the more I know about what she's thinking, on a certain day, or what she was thinking when she shot something, or what we're both interested in, allows that to emerge from the footage. And I think maybe the key to doing that is keeping at the level that KJ and I can work, which is kind of a high level way of talking about scenes. Because when you get into the nitty gritty of which frame is it, or which shot is it that we're using, that can push out the bigger ideas in a way. So I think we're able to keep our discussion on a really a meaningful level when we're working. And then when we hop off the phone and I get in there and edit, then the smaller decisions are kind of serve that bigger goal.
Can I give just like a really concrete example?
That would be great.
Of this, like, so, and I do also really want to talk about process, because I do think we did something deliberately unusual with this film, which is that we were interested in what editing would teach us about how to make the film, because tone we knew that was our biggest challenge. Like,
Yeah, and just to interrupt, I mean, the tone of this movie is also really, really unique, and that's so hard to maintain in a film, where the tone is such a strong takeaway in this movie. So yeah, please go ahead on
yeah,
that.
and we didn't, I think I had these really strong desires. I really want to make a funny movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how. And this movie is absolutely an experiment. I am begging cinema to help me figure out how to keep my dad from falling apart, to keep him from dying. I know that's a doomed mission, but like, this is actually what I'm doing. So for example, I would say that, like, the concrete example I wanted to come to was, Nels is very observant with observational footage, right? He's picking up very minute details that are sort of hidden in the observational footage that exists. So, in this movie, we have footage that I filmed the way I would film an observational film. We also, and that was sort of the evidence of what had been experienced, but we also knew that there was going to be imagined footage. And that is the place where like life is experienced, death is imagined. We don't know what it looks like. And so that point where those two things meet, when do those two things meet, was always this sort of question of the cinema language. But let's just go first to the observational footage. And, Nels had cut one scene and then he found some other scene with my mom. And I just remember him sort of giggling, like, hey, look, your mom turns the lights on and off in the bathroom, just like your kids did. And then he found another moment where my dad turns the lights on and off. Fine. Like he's just sort of building in like a little resonance of like these lights going on and off. And it was unavoidable in one of the pieces of footage. Like it's in the middle of the scene, the kids turn the lights off. You need to keep the continuity. So it had to be in there. The constraint of you must use this footage. But then Nels started picking up on pieces of it. Well, we have in the movie this fake funeral, which is a funeral I originally imagined. I want my dad in an open casket at the front of the church and all the people who loved him in the church. My dad loves the idea, thinks it's hilarious. I tell it to my brother. My brother's like, over my dead body. You're not putting dad in an open casket in the front of the church. Like, it's not happening. So then, okay, we came up with this, wonderful, like it gave us many new things to work with, choice of filming the casket in the same space the day before with my dad's best friend, Ray, who's the one who cries at the end. And we filmed a lot with my dad in the open casket. And then we positioned it so we could green screen it in to the actual funeral. Well, when we were cutting the funeral, we imagined it was going to go at the beginning of the movie and that someday my dad would really die and we'd film his real funeral and that would be the end of the movie. That was how I had imagined the film. At a certain point, we realized Dad's not going to die. We've got a whole movie. It's time to end this movie. And we're going to move the funeral to the end. And we got to kill my dad for real, right? All those things start to come late in the game. But up to the very last minute, we were trying to make that funeral function at the end. And Nels's concern was no one should leave this movie wondering, was Dick really in the open casket during the funeral? Did they use a green screen? Like, you don't want people to leave the movie like focused on how they do the open casket. So that was his big fixation. My big fixation was like, we've got to let the audience know that those are my dad's real friends, not just extras. Like those are his real friends. So we were both like obsessed with getting that into the cut. And then at the sort of like the very 11th hour, Nels pulls together this cut of the funeral, which is, very close to what it was at the very end. And he has made this moment happen with the casket where it sort of fritzes and then it flickers and then it fades away and it goes off. And I was like, Nels, how did you come up with that? That's like death. Either you just have a sudden death and you're out, or it's a slow, excruciating fade away, or you like fritz out. And he was just like, oh, it just felt like the thing that solves the problem of the audience not knowing whether the green screen happened, right? But for me, it's like we have the lights switching on and off throughout the movie between life and death. So like big idea down to like tiny piece of footage with a light switch.
Yeah, in some ways that kind of, shows like how an editor takes the big ideas and just kind of turns them into real world answers, when on a timeline.
Yeah, and I certainly can't say that I had the light switch in my mind when I did that. I mean, it was like 11:49 p.m. before picture lock or something, but certainly I mean, I think it was in the subconscious as an idea of a repetition of that thing, which was we'd already loved about KJ's family, that they loved to turn lights off and on.
We have a couple clips then, and I want to show a few clips. Just, it's not specific to exactly what we're talking about all the time, but I think it'll just kind of help remind people who've seen the film a little while ago and some of these issues that we're talking about that I think are going to come up for the next hour or so, about just this sort of balance, this play of this really interesting humanistic verite and these bigger ideas that are also at play in the film. So Jason and Josh, why don't we just launch into one of our clips here?
It would be so easy if loving only gave us the beautiful. But what loving demands is that we face the fear of losing each other. That when it gets messy, we hold each other close. And when we can, we defiantly celebrate our brief moments of joy.
Hold me close, hold me, babe. Let's make the most of the time that the day will save. Only a moment ago we were painting the town red, hot on the heels of a love that would never end. Strike up the band, can I have this dance to the bells ring falls, to the bells ring falls.
So cool. So that's this crazy flamboyant dance sequence in the film. But I'd like to talk not so much just specifically about the dance sequence, but just this sort of balance as everybody's sort of watching it. It's so different from a verite documentary footage of a man grappling with age and mortality. It's these very sort of flamboyant scenes which are interspersed throughout the movie. How did you guys sort of think about it in terms of the bigger pictures, the structure of the movie, of balancing between, these minute kind of scenes and then these incredible flamboyant scenes? And Nels, how did the editing take shape differently in your mind in terms of how you were doing those?
Yeah, should I start on that? When we first started working on the film, we didn't have these heaven sequences, these slow-mo kind of like really trippy on a stage set thing. So this was kind of an idea that we came up with, and KJ can talk a little bit more about this, but in response to Dick's declining ability to be in the stunts, which is really a big focus of how the film originated. And but once we started getting the idea for them, we were slotting them in as slugs, before the film was shot. We knew, okay, here's where we're going to go to heaven, and I like put up a still of a cloud in the sky or something. We said this is going to be heaven scene, and then it started to become clear that cutting to heaven and then coming back is one of these tricks that as an editor, you actually, it maybe seems harder than it is, but how can you miss? You can always cut to heaven. And when you're coming back from heaven, you're no longer obligated to any sense of time or place. You can come back to anything. And I always find this with movies, is the more you have going on at one time, if you can catch all the balls, there's a lot of balls to catch, and that makes it, in a way, it opens up possibilities rather than making things more difficult.
Was that something that you guys sort of discovered in the editing room, balancing those two, or was that always sort of part of the vision?
Both. right?
Yeah, both. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you have to figure out how to balance them eventually, but the idea of them was yeah, it was forming as we were working.
So, I mean, just to go back to like what was deliberately different about this process, and it came from things we learned from Cameraperson and a freedom that we felt coming out of Cameraperson, which was like, oh, we can go really far in our risk taking, and that cinema language will be there for us and all of these, like we can use all kinds of cinema language to help us in in this effort. And so one of the things I think is unusual about this film is that we knew from the start that we wanted to let the edit of it teach us more about what it needed to be. So I had this like idea, I'm gonna, my dad's gonna die in every scene of this movie. That's what I'm committed to. This movie's gonna be funny, and my dad's gonna die in every scene of the movie. So we started with that idea, and we held to the principle, post-death is imagined. Pre-death is something that actually happens, right? But that little edge is tricky. But what we're gonna do is start editing early, knowing we're missing almost everything that is the comedy. We're missing all of the deaths, but we're trying to understand what we're learning from the observational footage. And Nels is like, I mean, you're saying you put the slugs in and you did that later, but there's a way in which you're like, I'll take whatever material I have and I'm going to make a movie. And so, in my mind, I always had like, we're going to have these amazing stunts. We're going to catch dad on fire and I'm going to set him
Right.
out on the ice floe and we're going to go to Hong Kong. Like I wanted to do all of these things, right? Nels has got this like verite footage of me and dad in our house. And like, I make dad lie down at the bottom of the stairs. Like, it's borderline like embarrassing. You've never made a movie before, film school, like you're filming with your parents in your home kind of footage. And Nell starts making a movie out of it. And he cut a full movie just with the observational footage we had before there were any stunts. There was the funeral. And he kept doing that. Like I would be like, okay, I've got a new idea. We're going to film a new thing. And then he'd try to make it work. So for example, we had a scene where my dad is at the beach where we live looking for a place to bury my mom's ashes, and they're in this forest. And I'm like, oh, it'd be great if a tree fell on him and crushed him. So Nels finds a piece of archival footage of a tree falling and we put it in there. Or it'd be great if dad got hit by a meteor, and he took the Lars von Trier, meteor and put it in there. But the idea was like, okay, what do we learn when we do that? Well, we don't need to kill him every time. And what did we learn from doing the first set of stunts? It's like, my dad can't do a lot of things. We're not going to Hong Kong. I'm not putting him on an ice floe. And I was like getting really depressed because it's like, okay, all the stunts are going
to shoot on an ice floe.
Yeah, I know, right? I'm
That's
so
why.
like, and this was the first time I'd had money up front in my entire career. And this is just like the classic of life, people, right? It's like you finally have the money and suddenly your main protagonist is incapable of letting you spend it. Like it's just classic. Most of the time you have no money and all the time in the world. And here we were rushing against time because my dad's dementia was advancing really quickly. And so what happened in the dialogue with the producers, we had these wonderful producers, Marilyn Ness, Kay Chevigny, Maureen Ryan, who were in these discussions on a weekly basis. And at a certain point, they're like, why are you killing your dad? And I was like, because I'm trying to make a funny movie. And they're like, it's not funny. And that went on for months. Until at a certain point, because Nels had cut an entire film with a death in every scene, even though it was a provisional death, I realized like they're right. He doesn't need to die all the time. And they were like, well, can't we do something nice for him? Like instead of covering him in blood, like, and then it was like heaven. But we didn't shoot that heaven material till almost the very end of the movie. and it enters the movie at all these places. And so I think one of the things, Nels, I'm interested in talking about is like the ways that you so skillfully, like, you try to make an entire movie every time, but then it starts to sort of accrete, and you have these layers that are building up, so that then you realize, oh, okay, now that we've got the heaven and hell material, it can go here, here, and here, but we've already been building this thing. So I think, I don't know, I love thinking of the timeline as a physical object. So, you know.
Yeah,
Like,
well, and mine is
about-
too. I build my timeline up on itself. You know, by the time I'm done, I have 10 tracks of just junk floating around and things turned off. And I like it's seeing its history. This gets very edit nerdy, but instead of looking back at old cuts, I often turn off clips and they stay there, but they're off. And so when I want to look back at what I've done before or find it, you know, something I am on my same timeline and turning the clips back on to see, you know, what used to be there. So it is a sort of literal accretion on the timeline. Yeah, like there are sort of artifacts of that process too that are still in the movie in nice ways. Like when Dick gets into the van and the truck goes by outside the window. That was one of these deaths that we managed to kind of find in the verite. Not quite a death actually, because the truck misses him, but that was just a moment where there's a moment where Dick is getting into the car and KJ's on the passenger seat or on the driver's seat. He gets in, sits down, and then kind of does this nice smile simply because he got in the car. But we realized that if we timed it just right, we could do a visual effects truck going by in the background and make it look like he just dodged the truck. And then the smile has the meaning like, you know, I just dodged an enormous, you know, 40-ton delivery truck. And it just plays as this nice little moment that way. And so you always see those sort of tidbits looking through it. I feel like that makes it richer. I think there are editors out there who would say, you got to get rid of that stuff, or that you have to at least rethink it. And I think that the depth does accumulate.
I think this is definitely keying on a big question that you know, a lot of people who are interested in documentaries and production and directors are trying to unlock, and that they don't know, which is, and there's always different answers to it, which is how much of the movie is created in the editing room versus, you know, how much do you go in? And I can imagine, Nels, that, you know, for a documentary, another documentary you did, Very Semi-Serious, which is about, you know, New Yorker cartoonists and is you know, more traditional, that wouldn't have the benefits that you would have here, where you're really sort of working the material and exploring and getting to explore a little bit with KJ about coming up with the plan. Can you guys talk a little about that idea of sort of figuring out the movie during the edit process? And that may also dovetail to some very specific things. How long were you guys editing? You know, how KJ alluded to you starting very early in the process of her shooting. You know, how early, and how much were those conversations of you guys figuring it out on the fly? And then I'm also curious, just to throw it out as well, how much footage was ultimately shot for the movie? I mean, it seems like it could have gone in so many different directions. So a lot of questions, but a little bit of an overview with these ideas.
Well, I'll jump in on a piece of it. You know, I think I, in some ways, was interested in not knowing as much as possible in the making of this film. And I thought, okay, that's what documentarians do. We don't know what's going to happen. We know something's going to happen. If my dad's leaving his office or we're moving out of our family home and I'm there with a camera, something's going to happen. It's like a high stakes emotional moment. We've both lived in this house for 50 years. Something will happen. And I trust that as a documentarian, right? But what I learned in this film, which is so cool, is that you can keep not knowing in the edit room, and you can keep not knowing shooting fictional material that you have planned and is well produced, where crew is treated well, and you cannot know what's going to happen. And I would say, like, why that was necessary was because of this guy, right? He had dementia. You cannot control a person with dementia. And I did not wish to control my dad. I wanted him to stay at the center of things. I wanted him to have agency as much as possible. But I also was slightly delusional about my father's own dementia. I didn't want it to be happening. So I was imagining things were possible that were impossible. and my dad was like just being him. And so how does that play out? Well, that plays out, okay, we're going to do a stunt shoot to test how this will work. We've planned these 4 stunts. We've really planned them, but it turns out like my dad can barely walk down the street with a camera in front of him without freaking out and thinking he should stop or he should walk. We can't actually record sound because I have to talk to him all the time because he's about to trip. So my first obligation is like, keep him safe. So even though we'd done all this elaborate planning for the first stunts that we did, and they were supposed to be test stunts, they included, you know, the getting hit by the air conditioner, the getting hit by a bicycle, the getting hit by the bloody neck, you know, and it was really clear, like, uh-oh, my dad can't do a lot. And these things that were supposed to be test stunts would be all we had. And instead of saying like, oh, this is the end of things, it was like, no, this is what the dementia is. And
right,
this is
so those limitations kind of dictated.
yes, but also just like me and Nell just saying like, this is it. Like the dementia is leading us. We don't know how this movie is going to function, right?
We thought it for a while, right? Like we tried to get more stuff, and
for about
some of it
6
was
months.
good. But yeah, there was a scene where Dick was bitten by a rattlesnake. That was a wild shoot that we didn't end up using. Anyway, we could go into funny stories about that. But the deaths, yeah, we soon realized that the deaths were not the point, and that they were impossible to pull off with Dick's ability to perform them. I mean, he's not a stunt person.
Yeah, he couldn't perform at all.
Yeah,
like all he could do was be real.
Be himself. Yeah,
you know, all he could do was be himself, and that became very clear. Like, let us not attend. And so that same like, let's not act this. Let me not try to control this. And I definitely, there are ways in which, for sure, that first shoot with the open casket, I was really trying to like control it and get these shots and like think like a fiction film director. And they have a stilted, like, don't quite work quality to them that by the end, by the time we got to the heaven stuff, I was like, we were on fire. It felt like I was filming a documentary because we were in this space of not knowing to the last possible moment all of these things. And the edit was like that too. But maybe we should roll the clip of
the walking stuff.
Of the walking, because you know, because it's like, it's interesting in terms of the chronology of when we shot things and how they fit together.
Mm-hmm. All right, so here we go with another clip. This will just be a couple minutes.
Okay, so he scored 22 in 2017. He's scoring 19 now.
Oh, I've fallen apart.
Do you think your memory is the same?
Oh, it's better.
It's better than it was?
I don't know. It's probably the same.
Okay,
I don't think it's any worse.
Okay, so that's where we're going to ask your daughter for some information, if that's okay?
Well, okay.
Okay, so do you think his memory is changing?
Yeah, you know, I was trying to think of something to say, but I couldn't stop thinking about what's coming. His moments of forgetfulness are going to spread. He'll ask the same questions over and over again. His eyes will get that distant look. And his personality will begin to fade away. And he won't be able to follow what I'm saying, so I won't be able to ask him any more advice. And the whole time we'll just be trying to get by.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you to start walking. B marker. Okay, you good? All right, so Dad, we can start walking. Let's start walking. Just start walking to me. You're doing a great speed. That's fantastic. Just keep on walking. Just watch your step around here because it's a little bumpy. Just be careful. You're doing a great job. I love it. Okay, so Dad, just watch your step and jank.
Down.
Okay. Okay. 3, 2, 1, drop.
Oh no, that's me. It hurts so bad. Oh, you made that poor guy fall instead of me.
By the way, that's all.
That is just still so embarrassing. I hit my head in that boom pole. I can't even talk about not knowing where you are and what's happening. What made you laugh watching that clip, Nels?
It was the shot of you in the closet recording the voiceover. This is one of the things that we started that we've been doing since Cameraperson. In a way, it's like kind of living in the world of making a documentary film and making an independent documentary film too. And you know, I knew that KJ was recording this voiceover night after night literally in her closet, and you know, we started to kind of work that idea into the film that she's not just recording the voiceover, but she's in a place doing that. You know, there's a specificity to that gets introduced, you know, right here in the scene, and then sort of pays off later. But yeah, just these funny little insider jokes. I think in a way, like an insider thing, not inside jokes, because that sounds exclusive, but doing things that we loved, you and me, KJ, knowing that somebody else might get them, was a lot of the fun stuff that we do here, and it's crediting everybody else's idea to kind of like, you know, pick up on it.
And I mean, I'll go back to my, like, I've got a big philosophical idea while we're doing it. You know, like for me, it was like, I care about the unseen, right? Like, you know, so that if we're gonna, for me, it's like, okay, I'm tripping out on like, what is a person? What's an image? What's behind the making of an image? And so that for me, like that was part of Cameraperson, like let's reveal that it is many of us making films and that there are many humans in the process. And I think the things that are hidden from us, that the sort of on a societal justice level, like the fact that we hide the makings of things, and we hide people, that we hide people in prison, or we hide people in nursing homes, or we hide people who make pink fake plastic Christmas trees, right? That all of this hiding is part of why we're damaged, and that what we've got to do is reveal and be real. And, you know, that part of what we're struggling with is our own shame about our inadequacies, about the things that we don't do well. And it's like, let's open it up and talk about it, right? And so I'm bringing all of that to the work and thinking about the crews in the shots and behind the scenes, and I'm bumping my head on the boom pole. But it also becomes like, you know, Nels and I didn't want to do a voiceover for this film, but at a certain point, you know, working with the team at Netflix, Jason Spingarn-Koff was like, KJ, you got to try voiceover. Like, you're throwing your dad under the bus, you're not throwing yourself under the bus. And I was just like dying. I really didn't want to do it. It was really hard for me. And it was corresponding with the time my dad was really starting to wake up in the night all the time. And so I could only go into the closet and do it. And then at one point, my dad like woke up in the middle of the night and opened the door on me. And I have the sort of recording of me being startled in my pretentious voiceover by him coming in. And I hear myself and I'm like, oh God, like this isn't real. What I'm doing with this voiceover isn't real. And I tell that to Nels. And then at a certain point, Nels is like, oh my God, that's so hilarious. Like we should film you in the closet recording yourself. And then where Nels is sort of a genius, and you know why he has a co-writer credit on this film, is that it's not just the structure that he so brilliantly like built and let, you know, sort of build and build and build. He would have ideas like he would hear that story, and then he'd say, okay, we can set that up in one part of the movie and we're going to pay it off later. And then, you know, where we paid it off was so emotional for us, because my dad was so lost by the time we do that final scene where he appears at the end of the closet when I come out, where I'm saying long live Dick Johnson. For the shot, we had to sort of leave him standing alone in the middle of the bedroom, and like someone was whispering, like, go Dad, go towards the door. He would have forgotten that I was already in the closet, that there was a camera person in the closet. And like, and we had these crazy moments where like I'm in the closet and then he opens the door in the middle of it. So we were like repeating what I had actually experienced in real life the first time I tried to do the voiceover with him. And then that was making me emotional about the fact that my dad couldn't remember, like, for 10 seconds to open the door on me. But then the feeling of like, but he is still alive and he is still out there. That was all real for me. And so that writing that voiceover of like, long live Dick Johnson, that's all I want to say. Like, all of that stuff was feeding itself. And Nels was so like sharp on it, where it would be like, okay, we do that, and then he'd see it and you're like, I think we redid that one. Like we didn't get it.
I think we did it twice. Yeah.
We did that
I mean,
one
you did it several takes, but we did 2 days of shooting on it.
We brought a camera crew back and brought them into my closet and asked my dad to
because we knew it was essentially the last shot and we needed the perfect performance in a way.
Yeah, but we couldn't control the performer.
Yeah, no, I mean,
or
it's
this
really
performer
hard.
either. You know, I'm not a performer.
Yeah, it also gets to some of the, you know, complexities of this kind of documentary filmmaking, you know, where like, yeah, the scene in You in the Closet was created as an element after the movie had already been sort of started to put together, and you guys are now looking at the movie as a story, as a bigger story, and sort of seeing kind of what else is needed and how to better communicate these ideas.
That's right. So the refining process is always going on, but that was always built into the process. So like, to be clear, we went and sound mixed early to learn things about tone, like very early in the process. So to go back to your thing, Jeremy, about how long did we work? Did you cut for a year, Nels?
I certainly, there was a year that elapsed from when I started and when we were done, and that doesn't even count. The funeral scene was shot before, kind of in the fundraising process.
Yeah.
That was one of the first things that was shot, among the first things that was shot for this film. So I helped cut that over the course of a few days, you know, as kind of a proof of concept, and you know, so we worked on that a while before. But yeah, it was around a year, but not nonstop during that time.
But we were creating like Nels is also very handy where he can sort of like try VFX ideas. So, you know, the plane with the banner was his idea and he mocked it up and put it in. And then way at the end, when we actually got to the VFX house, they were sort of like, this is really good. We don't want to redo it, you know, like, and
I had all sorts of ideas for them to improve it. And they're like, I don't think it needs to be improved. So, yeah.
So, I mean, I think like, you know, this was built into the process very deliberately, that we knew we were going to create things in response to the observational footage. But, you know, just to go back to that dancing sequence of the film and how that all came together on you know, I'm looking at some of these questions about like, how did the structure evolve? From that very first day of talking about the film, I was like, Nels, I think my mother's car accident is like why I'm making this movie. And he's like, great, let's get it in the movie. But we have no footage or anything about it. And I would, you know, periodically bring it up and he'd be like, great, let's get it in the movie, but there's no footage. And at a certain point, I was imagining, oh, I'll do a reconstruction of my mother's car accident. We'll do that. But I kept saying, I want that in the movie. And Nels kept saying, great, we have no footage. And at a certain point, I remember having a really profound discussion about like, how much is this movie about my mother? How much is it about my father? Who's the core of the movie? And it was like, you think about the structure of a movie, you're like building up and it's a linear timeline that people are trying to track and follow. It's a story, but like, where is its heart? Like, where is like the sinkhole of the movie? And you think about Cameraperson, for me, it's the baby who's struggling to live in the hospital in Nigeria is like it's the deep core of the movie. And for me, this moment of my dad being bloodied in the stunt, which was a stunt that we filmed in probably November of 2017, combined with archival footage that I shot of my mom in like 2004, combined with a photo of my mother from 1943, combined with this elaborate dance scene that we conceived in June of whatever 2018 that we filmed in August of 2018. And then, you know, when we got all that footage of the dance stuff, this is where you come in, Jeremy Workman. You know, you had done this incredible job with the trailer of Cameraperson, which is like a super dense, complicated movie, and you had like brought it into coherence in 2 minutes. And Nels and I were really caught up in these big structural questions, working really hard. We were like behind, and we sort of needed like the dance thing to just like be a thing so we could figure out where to put it. And Nels was like, this is gonna take me a week to cut this. We don't even know where it's going. I'm not even sure there's a place for it in the movie. And I was desperate. I was like, I know there's a place for this. I don't know where it is. And as you recall, we shot it in slow motion, did not have music for it. So it was a slow motion dance scene without music that I asked you, Jeremy Workman, to cut.
It is true.
That didn't have a place in the movie.
Yes.
And then Nels made it the heart of the movie.
Yeah, yeah. And it sort of integrates really, really beautifully, and how it leads in and integrates other scenes from previously in the movie. It's really nicely done. So yeah, that was a real thrill getting to work on that with you guys. Very, very great experience on that.
Yeah, and many thanks to you on that
Yeah,
too.
sure.
To be able to have that appear as a you know, completed chunk was like such a relief.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Nels, how did you, let me just ask you this question. Like, you know, the movie has so much of like the process. And I know KJ is talking a lot about this, about showing that kind of the messy process. And, you know, there's footage where, you know, we see the boom operator and footage is out of focus and the camera goes on its side. And, you know, how much of an editor were you kind of trying to figure out that palette versus these other scenes, which are so incredibly shot, and, you know, KJ shooting with a red and they're beautiful and slow-mo, you know, where did you find that sort of visual palette as well in the editing room?
Every time I don't really do assembly edits. I try to cut straight to like a rough cut. You know, an assembly, I think of that as like throw everything you've got in, or throw a lot of stuff in that you might use. And my preference is to go towards trying to make a movie and then improve that movie, hopefully over the course of the editing process. But one thing that I do always put in any movie that I'm working on is like whatever goofy meta moment pops up, where the boom pole falls onto somebody's head, or, you know, where somebody chokes, or, you know, where the camera falls down. And I'd done that with very semi-serious with KJ's film already. She was backing up shooting at verite, slammed into a wall, and you know, we fritzed the camera out, and I was like, of course I'm going to do that. And so when we did Cameraperson together, it was such a delight for me, because it is 100% that. It's all about the moments where it's not about the subject of the film anymore, it's about the filmmakers, you know, and that's just what we look for, and made that movie out of those moments. But yeah, so I guess that's the answer, is it's my favorite thing to use those things. And so then, and I feel like they become so valuable once you provide the language for them to work. Once the audience understands that there is a real person or people behind the camera, and that this is not just the movie that you're seeing, but it's the movie that's happening on the other side of the lens as well. And we really relied on that technique that we used first for Cameraperson. We sort of took it for granted in this film, that you would understand, or kind of begin to understand that KJ is actually, you know, holding the camera for most of the film. And then those moments just become beautiful when she sets the camera down by her dad, because the giving him a hug is the more important thing, or, you know, they're crying together. That's a deeply meaningful shot all of a sudden, even though it's, you know, by some, you know, standards an outtake, or a junker.
And KJ, were you ever worried, like, oh my God, I'm throwing the kitchen sink at Nels and everything, I'm trying everything, and, you know, is this movie going to even hold? Is it going to all come together?
I mean, so here are the things. I mean, one, I was never worried about Nels. You know, I was worried that I had started everything too late, that my father was already further gone, and that that I had lost the chance to capture his extraordinary essence. And that's the biggest thing I was afraid of the whole time, besides like keeping him safe and those things. You know, there was a real comfort I had in like, this movie can be a failure because I'm trying to keep my father alive. Like I'm trying to put him back together. Like, of course it's going to be a failure. So there's a way in which I was sort of hurtling towards that with some kind of comfort, but I was also like, we gotta get one big laugh. Like I was just always like one big laugh. But one of the other things that Nels does just in an extraordinary way that I think is really meaningful to editors is very small details, you know, like I said, the lights going on and off, but things that he does with graphics or with like a moment of black or putting something on the screen. Like I remember at a certain point, he's like, I really want to like put a time, like a card up that says like a year has passed. And I was just like, why do you want to do that? Like, we don't need to do that. Like, that's, you know, like, what's that idea? It's just like, I love putting those in movies. I love when those happen in movies. And I'm just like, what is that? But in fact, you know, what we discovered, I mean, one of the features of my father's dementia is that it has been fairly constant. He was further along than I thought he was. And he's been fairly constant, both like loving to me, lucid some of the time, totally lost and confused a lot of the time. And that sort of stayed the same. Like one day of my dad in 2016 is like the range that it is in the film. He is still that way now in 2020. And so we had to construct his dementia. So we had to sort of rebuild him in the beginning of the film and then have the feeling that the dementia had advanced. And at a certain point, Nels realized like my 1 year later moment is that the audience will believe the dementia has advanced. And even though there's like not as much, like the evidence isn't there in the film, you're like, oh, he's worse. And they can't do the things they were doing. Even though we couldn't do the things we were doing in the beginning, right? Of making the movie.
And then after that, we have the really lucid interview with him in Portugal, I think. So, you know, that's a trick that you play on the audience, not a evil trick, but like to say, remember, time is elapsing, things are getting worse. And then the audience then applies that, you know, kind of Kuleshov effect style to seeing what's next. It gave us some freedom to continue to do what we needed to do without getting lost in it. You know, it's what's the timeline.
But it like gives you ideas. So it was like, oh, Nels did the plane.
And then the soup. And then we did it with the soup.
Let's put the heart attack on the book in the beginning. Yeah. Let's put the alphabets in the soup.
It's the alphabet soup is great.
You know, and then when we were really desperate of like, we've got to really kill my dad for real. If we're going to put the funeral at the end, how are we going to do that? We're going to do that with the ambulance scene. And then if we use the trope of documentary cinema and we put a date on it, people are going to believe this really happened because there's a date on it. And so
for the ambulance scene.
Yeah, right before the funeral happened. So I think Nels is like, that's the thing. He's always sort of playing with those things and taking the graphics really seriously. And we did that a lot with Cameraperson. Like, what is the interstitial between all this footage? Is it the place? Is it the name of the movie? Is it the date? You know, but he'll play with that. He'll play out an idea and see what it does. And inevitably it gives you new ideas. And that's like, for me, what shooting is like, I film things, I see images that I can only see with a camera, and then that gives me new ideas. And that's what Nels does in the edit room all the time. It's like he takes the very minutia of the process is constantly giving him new ideas, which makes it really fun. And it is fun.
It sounds really like a blast. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like most directors and editors, when you talk to them, I mean, it's such a slog, you know, 500 hours and we're trying to tame the beast. Yeah. But with you guys, it sounds like it was just this really unique, collaborative, you know, kind of back and forth thing that just sounds so unique in amongst documentary filmmakers.
Well, and I believe in the back and forth. You know, Jeremy, it's like the back and forth of us working together with that dance footage. There was no music, but you had, I was like, put whatever music you think makes sense, cut to it. And then we composed a song in relation to the rhythm that you created. But that song for me, I was like, it's not doing it's not doing as many weird things as I wanted to do. And then we went into the sound mix and Pete Horner added these like, incredible car crash, building off of Nels, who had created the moment with my mom's car crash, that then we brought real sounds of real car crash into that dance montage, which is nothing I could have ever imagined in the beginning. But I did know the car crash mattered in the beginning. And I kept asking the collaborators I'm working with of like, how do we make this work? How do we make this work? And everyone's bringing ideas, and then the ideas start to feed each other. And I think for me, that's the joy of collaboration, is like none of us own it, none of us control it. But if we can like be mutually respectful and have fun with it, then like cool stuff starts to happen.
And this comes back to my first comment about the film, which is it's such a high wire act of editing. This is not easy. And a lot of movies kind of go down in flames when they try this approach. It's just very hard to keep a control of the story. So it's a real testament to the film. But I want to ask Nels another question here, but just for the group, feel free to fire. We're going to start taking some questions, so feel free to, send them out, and we'll start kind of bringing those in as well. Nels, for you as an editor, how do you think it's going to be, if some, to switch hats a little bit, and now if you're working on a more traditional editing a more traditional documentary, if it's about some social issue or climate change or whatever the documentary is, like, how do you now step, what is the process for you to step out of this experience into something that is a little bit more traditional?
I like to look for projects
Yeah.
that aren't traditional. I mean, I think, to the degree that you can choose to work on projects like this, you do, things that give you a lot of freedom. I'm working on one right now, and we're really engaged in a lot of the same sort of, fun tricks on something in a completely different film. But I just found myself using the same trick that I used with Dick Johnson getting into the car, the passenger door car. He smiles. What was he reacted to? We have no idea. But if we put something in there, then it comes alive. And I did that with like a little beeping noise on a clip today. And it's funny, it's great. It makes something happen. And so, yeah, but everything applies to everything. I was looking, actually, this film in the background here, City Manifest, was the first feature that I ever edited, the poster there. And the director of that passed away, sadly, just a few days ago. So I was watching a clip of that, and I realized, watching that clip from the first feature that I cut, that there were 4 or 5 techniques in that I've been using on every film since. These, goofy meta moments, text on screen, kind of tricks that I didn't realize I've been repeating over and over again. Oops, sorry, my screen light just went out there. So it's you can use all this stuff over and over again, as long as it works. I think I could conceive of times when it wouldn't be appropriate or whatever, but I haven't run into those yet.
I mean, just to be clear, like, I feel like Nels is saying both like the top note and the really low deep note, which is like the top note is like, we all have our like go-to things that we do and the things that we're interested in, and it's like how we frame a shot or how we like cut a scene. Those are like things that we do because we love this work and we keep doing it over and over and over again, and there's something about it that speaks to us on some deep level, right? But so Nels is doing all those tricks always, but they're always like in service to like some really deep set of questions that are very alive for him, that are very alive for me. Like, we freak out about this stuff. Like, we were raised religiously, and like, I believe that God saw my thoughts. So there's like all this really deep questioning around, how much do you trust the audience? How much do you lead the audience? How much do you like be surprised by what the audience knows? Because Nels and I think about like, what does God know? Like, what did God know when we were kids, right? So those kinds of thinkings, or like thinking about time as circular rather than linear, those are, we're talking about those like little like habitual things, and then these deep things. And I would love to show the Cameraperson trailer because for me, what's so powerful in that is, Jeremy, in terms of craft, we struggled for quite a long time, not that long for Nels, 5 months of editing for Nels, I think like 6 years of struggling for me to make that film. Out of 25 years of footage, we made it into an hour and a half long film, and then you cut it into a 2-minute trailer. But I feel like you got to the depth. Each choice you made about the shots you include is like the deep note of Nels and the deep note of me. So I would love to show that Cameraperson trailer, and then maybe we can.
And
talk.
I could even, just kind of tee it off a little bit. It's interesting because KJ is talking about, as a director, these ideas that are very complex and big ideas, and yet sometimes as an editor, you have to just boil them down to, really kind of, their simple, human, very kind of their simplest form. And I think what worked in the Cameraperson trailer is just trying to make it, not getting overwhelmed with the big picture stuff, but also thinking about it just in terms of, telling a story in a simple way for an audience, and you could see that Nels was doing so much of that as well in Dick Johnson. But yeah, let's definitely have a look at that. And everybody.
That's pretty, through that yellow flower. There's amazing wildflowers here.
Is the haze working for you?
Not loving it, but we're getting pieces of stuff that don't have haze.
Was it an easy delivery, that one?
Yes, it's very easy.
You got me. Is it okay if I film you? Mom? Change the subject and ask if she was always such a great dresser.
Kaže, jeste se uvijek tako fino oblačili, imali stila?
Uvijek.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, it's good.
Great.
Good trailer.
Good trailer. I mean,
really good trailer. Yeah,
yeah.
Love that.
I mean, for me, that's 25 years worth of footage distilled by you, Nels, into an hour and a half, distilled by you, Jeremy, into 2 minutes. And like, Nels discovered in the footage that that it was all about love, right? Like, and that it was about like love and relationships and connections that scaled up from like a mother or child all the way up to like a society and trying to struggle with genocide, right? And that whole scale up in the movie, like somehow in the trailer, like you get there too, which kind of just blew me away. Like, how is that possible? And I think that's like craft, right? Like that's our craft, which I think we all have so much debt to so many extraordinary filmmakers who come before us and who've taught us, like, how do you grapple with something immense in human life in an hour and a half? How do you speak it in 60 seconds? Like, that's craft.
Yeah, and these are, as you've all been hearing, these are big ideas, and not every documentary, even wants to go near those big ideas, you know, and Cameraperson really has like these very, you know, it's kind of so unique. It's like almost like an experimental movie. KJ is using footage that she's sort of repurposing. It's an essay movie. It has some similarities to Dick Johnson, but it's in some ways has less of a narrative kind of thrust. So, you know, it just reminds you and reminds all the filmmakers in the room or people that are aspiring to be filmmakers, you know, you can really sort of go for it, you know, and as long as you sort of ground it in the human storytelling and the human connections, audiences will really get there. Is that something with Dick Johnson that you guys were ever worried about? You know, would audiences get all these deep issues? You know, would if you know, I've definitely heard the big, you know, I heard from working with KJ as well, just, you know, trying to accomplish all these big issues. Are you guys ever worried when you're trying to do this, assemble it, that people aren't going to get it, that there's, you know, how much are they going to get these big topics? You know, is that ever a worry?
I mean, you know, the thing I remember really early working with Nels is just like, the audience is smart. The audience is human. They understand loss. They understand desire. They understand like what it feels like to be surprised. Like, just trust the audience, like, to be smarter than you, and then like scramble to try to get a little bit ahead of them, or to at least give them the tools to engage with the movie, and leave space for the audience in the movie. And then they bring their own stuff to the movie. You know, and I think that everyone watching Dick Johnson is Dead is bringing their stuff to the movie. The stuff they're afraid to face, our mortality that we're all afraid to face, their relationships to their own parents. And I love that. Like, I love that the sort of like the porousness, like letting everyone's stuff into the movie. And I love sort of seeing the movie back, you know, through other people's eyes. And that gives back to me. So I think of it as this ongoing process. I see that people are wondering how much time we actually spent working together, Nels. Do you want to, like, in person?
Yeah, sure. I can give a quick answer to that. Yeah, so I live in Oakland, California, and KJ's in New York, and so I've been working remotely, and I work with, you know, directors kind of all over the place, a lot of times in New York. And so the typical way I do it is, KJ alluded to this earlier, I try to have a meeting with the director at the beginning of the project and kind of get on the same, it's like a team building event in a way. I remember we had some delicious lobster rolls in Brooklyn, and like, you know, we really spent some nice time hanging out together, but not working for a few days at the beginning of the project. And then I get the footage back here in Oakland and try to watch everything, and then begin cutting. And this takes, you know, over the course of several weeks or, you know, a couple months, try to cut things. And then as soon as I'm cutting, usually I start sending things to the director, and did this with KJ, and we start talking about what's been cut, but with the kind of goal of getting to a workable cut, you know, kind of a first draft or a first cut. And we mostly did that remotely. And then at some point in the process, maybe twice with this, KJ was able to come out here for a week or so, and I have what I call the director hotel. My wife and I are always really happy to have people come and visit, and so that's the guest bedroom, and people are welcome to stay here. And then we have these intensive, you know, kind of interactive things where we work on things that have really been sort of lying in the background, or some big step forward, something like that we can do in person. But then it's back to coast to coast, and just sending quick times for the most part, you know, with Dropbox to get into the nuts and bolts of it.
But I will just say, because I spent like several years trying to cut Cameraperson, you know, sort of by myself, and then with an editor, wonderful editor named Amanda Laws. But I worked through, I think, a thing that is very common with first-time directors, but certainly I think actually very particular to people who shoot their own material, is that, like, I love images. I love seeing what one image does to another image, and then another image. What does that do next to that image? And I want to cut it here, and I want to. And I spent all this time just like trying every single like option I could of putting one image next to another image, but and thinking structurally and all these things. But by the time I started working with Nels, I was like, you know what? I'm like a director who's trying to take the body of the camera person and like move them around and get the shot. And because I'm just like, you all see I'm like a visual maximalist. I like love it. I just want to see one more shot next to it. I learned with Nels is just like, let it go. Like he's put a scene together. It's not how I'd cut it. It's missing that favorite shot of mine. It doesn't start where I wanted to, doesn't end where I wanted to. But like, okay. And he's stringing together a bunch of scenes. None of them work for me. I'm uncomfortable with all of them. They don't look like what I want them to. And I just like, it's not that I just like lay back and be like, oh, good. It's like, that's interesting.
To your great credit, yeah, it's hard to do that.
It took me years of trying to control everything and watching that fail over and over and over again, especially for visually, engaged people. It's like it hurts. A bad cut hurts, or the fact that you're using an out of focus moment, or like that you didn't use my favorite shot. It physically hurts. But if you try to be that kind of controlling director in the edit room for a couple of years and you still realize you don't have a movie, that hurts worse.
Yeah.
And
we try to fix those things at some point, but not right off the bat. We don't get mired down in those sorts of questions early on. It's definitely sort of sketching to each other. Right. Yeah, that's true.
Matter, but you think it does because you're the possessive director who has all these ideas, who shot this footage, and you think it matters. So I think if, like, as a director, you try to assert control, I mean, almost ever, but like too early in the process, you're just crushing your editor, not allowing them to breathe and explore the footage and explore the ideas. And like, you are depriving yourself of all these amazing discoveries. Because the editor is seeing your blind spots. They have perspective on you. They have perspective on the footage. They don't have all the stuff in your head. They just have what's in front of them. So I love like how Nels taught me to trust it. Just like trust it and like, let's see what comes.
Yeah, KJ, you knew how to trust it though, but as a cinematographer, I think of being directed as an editor the same way maybe a director works with an actor and or with a cinematographer, where ideally the director allows somebody to understand the why of what they're doing. What are we trying to do here? What are our goals? What's the emotion here? And that's why the discussion is so important.
Yeah, it really speaks quite a lot to what, kind of some of these big picture ideas of an editor working with a director. That's sort of the idea of our talk from a big picture. And just this idea of how Nels has kind of taken all these big concepts from KJ and all this kind of disparate footage, and together they've kind of created this kind of this alchemy where it's kind of coming back and forth, and it really gets to the process of an editor director relationship in a very underscored way, in some ways more than other director editors that I've spoken to. Yeah, so I think there's something really neat about your collaboration here.
Me too.
Yeah, well, we've gone quite a long time already. We've already gone an easy 90 minutes. I'm sure we could all go probably double that.
That's the end of a good movie. 90
yeah. So we probably should wrap up, but I know this has been super fascinating, and I just everybody should really have even relook at Dick Johnson is Dead. A film like that is so rich that you just see stuff each time. I've seen it so many times now, and every time I see it, there's just more complexity. It's like it's like a poem where it's just like stuff kind of pops out each time you revisit it. So definitely everybody should really check that out. Check out Cameraperson as well. KJ, Nels, do you want to sort of anything to kind of wrap us up here, take us home? Any last words about the collaboration, about the film, about your process?
I always want the last word, so I'm going to give it to Nels.
You take it. No, you take it. I was just going to say to many more or something.
Yeah, I mean, I'm excited. I think that we embolden each other and we're rigorous with each other, and we really trust each other, and we love each other, and it's just, you know, like, it's beautiful, like to like, we're built like in that way that timeline is accumulating. I think the relationship is like gonna take us further into what we can make together. But I just want to affirm to everyone who's listening that, like, this communication that we all attempt to do in filmmaking, like, it's so alive for me. Like, I'm trying, like, and it's hard during this pandemic time. It's like I'm trying to imagine you out there. Like, if we were all together in the room, I'd be like seeing you and running around and like understanding who's the person asking this question. And I miss that, but I am so glad that those of you who like aren't in New York or aren't in Oakland, like, that we can all be in the room together. And Jeremy, I'm so grateful for your collaboration on, you know, both of these projects, and to have this conversation. So huge gratitude to all of us, like, trying to make something that matters together, like across this crazy space and place that we are in.
And everybody, you know, cross your fingers. The film is shortlisted for an Oscar, so congratulations on that. That means it's, you know, in the final dozen or 15 documentaries that are really deemed the ones that'll possibly be nominated. So we're going to be rooting that it you know, gets a nomination, and people can continue to see it. Of course, if you haven't seen it, you can find it on Netflix. And Cameraperson, I think you could find where? Criterion Channel?
Criterion, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Best channel to be watching in these times.
Awesome. Any last things before we bring on Josh? I'm gonna do my own plug. I have a new movie that I made that's going to be premiering at South by Southwest next month. It's called Lily Topples the World. It's about a domino toppling sensation, a young woman who's a great domino toppling artist. So look out for that.
World needs to be toppled.
That's cool.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Thanks, Nels. Thanks, KJ. Josh, why don't we bring you back on? It's been a real pleasure, and I'm really thrilled to have gotten to done this and hear all these big ideas from you guys. And my next move, Nels, is to get a director hotel in my backyard.
It's a very small guest bedroom.
That's
yeah.
Okay.
Is it open? I'll come out just to get away from my family for a little while. Seriously, it's I'll have a staycation in your house.
I might do it myself. Yeah.
Thank you again, guys. It was great to, you know, be experiencing it. I you know, when I'm at these shows live, this is another thing about doing them when there wasn't a pandemic. I was running around, running the live stream. I got very little of the content until we watched the footage afterwards, and we were cutting highlights, and I get to participate as if I'm logging in and as a viewer, and what a difference it makes to sit there and just really take it in. So, you know, that's been maybe a silver lining. And I've been to events with you in the room, Kirsten, and you run around and
I move.
Yeah, exactly. So I wondered if you were gonna, you know,
it's like this is the best I can do. That's all I got. I don't got much.
Well, I think it was great, and I also agree that the idea that people can take advantage of an event like this without having to all come to one place that has a maximum capacity. You know, we always get more people on these than would ever fit into a room. So, you know, there is something really, there's something really special about it. So thank you guys again. And I did want to say, oddly enough, our next event is going to be on March 18th, and we're going to be talking with a group of thought leaders, one of my least favorite terms out there, about the future of the entertainment industry, and you know, essentially the implications of what's happening now on all aspects of it. So look out for that. And again, I'm going to thank OWC, American Cinema Editors, AJA, Jason and Janet, who did all the work, by the way. Did you notice I said, I'm going to text you when there's 5 seconds left in the clip. They completely took over. The lag on my Vimeo was so bad that I had no idea what was going on. So I was flailing around over here, enjoying the show. They were doing all the work. So thank you for making it look easy, guys. And for you 3 year too. Just, you make my life easy here. And I really had a great time. So thank you. And I guess we'll see you next time on Sight Sound and Story Live.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I grew up in a household in the projects in East Harlem. There's a program at WNET, the public television station, to get more people of color behind the camera, in the editing room, doing sound, writing scripts. When they put me in a dark room and they showed me how to use the splicer and the rewinds, I felt this big sigh of relief, this sense of, wow, I found my space. The editing part of filmmaking is the real nuts and bolts, what makes films come to life. You can ask Spielberg, you can ask Tarantino, you can ask Spike. When you sit here, this is where the proof is in the pudding. I'm Sam Pollard, and this is my class on documentary editing.